Welcome to the Friendzy.
Hi, I'm Melissa Carter.
And I'm Jenn Hobby. The Friendzy's mission is to celebrate friendships over 40. We believe that women thrive through authentic relationships, self-discovery, and spiritual exploration.
Our decades-long friendship continues to grow because we are willing to go there and share the truth through life's highs and lows. And that's why the Friendzy is here to hold space for women who are 40 and older, because at this age, your story matters more than ever. I'm Melissa, and I once caught my parents doing it as a teenager.
Traumatic. As a teen.
As a teenager, fortunately, the room was dark. I just heard the noises, but that was enough.
Did you open an unlocked door?
So I had left to go to our high school football game, and I forgot something, so I came back in and was trying to find it, was trying to find them, and then heard what they were doing and escaped as quickly as I could.
Now, as an adult, are you proud of them?
Well, of course, because when I was a teenager, that means they were in their 60s. So they had me later. So yeah.
Get it, Mr.
Right.
and Mrs. Carter.
All right, Bob and Millie P going at it.
Yeah.
So yes, but for a 17-year-old, it was like, oh, la 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 la.
Totally. I'm Jenn Hobby, and I have to make my bed every day or else I feel like I failed. And I have a total of 10 pillows on my bed.
Oh, honey. Now see, I don't understand the pillow thing. I didn't get that gene as
10.
a woman.
I was
Why do you
counting
have 10?
them while I was making my bed today.
Is it part of the bedspread that you purchased, or are these like mementos that you've kept over time?
No mementos. It's just the way that we are quirky when we sleep. So we have to, my husband and I both have to have a firmer pillow and a softer pillow, like a squishier one to sleep with. So that's 4 right there. Then we have 2 big decorative shams, 3 throw pillows, and then 1 in front. And that came from our designer who designed our bedroom. So she added an additional 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
I love that you have
6.
a bedroom designer. That's very fancy.
Aren't we so fancy? I know.
I've never even heard of that. I probably
What?
need him. A bedroom designer?
Well, just a home designer. And when we moved into our house, that was the first bedroom we did. I said, because if we don't do our room first, we'll never do it. So I wanted it to be a little oasis, an escape.
I like it. No judgment here. You're in a safe
But now
space.
there's
Except for maybe the pillows.
10 pillows. 10.
Yeah, and I'm always, so when I stay at someone's house, like what was it? I had a neighbor who had water issues, still dealing with that because I live in a townhome, and so it flooded my basement. And so I've had to get the floor redone, construction done, all that stuff. But bless her heart, her whole place has had to be redone. So anyway, long story short, when it started, I had to stay at Katie's house because, our son's there. So it was fun to have, me, and I stayed in her guest room. And the same damn thing. They
How
had
many pillows?
I didn't count, but it's about the same. And so when I took them off, I told my son, because my son wanted to spend the night with me because I was coming over there, right? And so I'm like, well, honey, you're going to have to remind me. I should have taken a picture because I was so paranoid
About
how
putting
to
it back.
put them back. Katie probably doesn't even know how to put them back, but because that room's not used that often. But anyway,
It was pristine.
I was intimidated. And when I stay at someone's home, because that's not the first time I've been at a friend's home that had 15,000 pillows on the bed, it scares me because you should leave a diagram of exactly what's supposed to go where. Because I got my pillows. I don't even have shams on my, I got the plain old bedspread with nothing else on it.
Simple,
straightforward, probably boring. Probably not. Your designer would probably, if he or she is listening, is probably cringing right now. She's probably cringing.
She might, yeah.
And hearing the fact you don't have any pillow, you don't have any shams, you don't have any. Yeah, I used to have stuff like that, but it just I have had that before because it came with the whole bedding.
Yeah,
and then I stopped because I guess the logical, I guess I don't know, the feng shui part of me is like, why do I need that? This is extra obstacles for me to get in the bed.
Does that make you pragmatic where you're like, I just need to get in the bed and then also I need to make it faster. So we're going to simplify.
I just think I'm getting old. I think I'm getting old set in my ways. I think it's turning into like that grandparent who was fussy about any change. I don't need a pillow. I don't need a pillow for. I just need to get in the bed. I mean,
All right, now I know what I'm getting you for your birthday. Okay.
fantastic.
Coming up on today's episode, we are talking about gender identity. It is a topic that you've seen in headlines or at the center of social media debates, but how much do we really understand about gender identity? What do the terms transgender, non-binary, cisgender, or gender expression actually mean? And so by opening up to new conversations and asking the honest questions, we can grow together as friends.
You're going to meet Gabrielle Claiborne, who has been an out and active trans woman since 2010. She's an author, a keynote, and TedX speaker, and co founder of Transformation Journeys Worldwide, an inclusive training and consulting firm with a transgender focus. Now, she has served on the executive board of Atlanta Pride, and her work has been featured in Forbes magazine. And our conversation is enlightening, to say the least.
Did you know that the Friendzy now has a private Facebook page? It's a safe community to celebrate friendships over 40 and make some new friends too. So if you sign up for our email newsletter, you'll get the invite. Just sign up today at thefriendzy.com.
And thanks to listeners who have subscribed to our email list at thefriendzy.com. 3 new names are Shannon Berger, Essie McRae, and Karen Bove. Thank you so much. They don't know that we're saying hi to them, giving them a shout out. We just pay attention. Thank you.
Love that. Have you subscribed to the Friendzy podcast yet? Please do. It really helps us out, and leave us a review. You can subscribe on Apple Podcasts or wherever you are listening to podcasts.
And if you enjoy this episode of The Friendzy, please share it with a friend, because we would love for more people like you to find out about our show. We are going to dive into this conversation with Gabrielle Claiborne coming up. So that's something you definitely want to share with a friend. But first, a message from our sponsors. Lifeline. Oh, Lifeline's not first. I'm sorry. Kick It Pajamas. Trying to psych you out there. Kick It Pajamas for 10% off if you use code word Friendzy. Lifeline screening. Get your veins checked. I need to get my veins checked to make sure that I do the right sponsor first. And then you use the code FRIENDS without the Y, and they will know that we sent you there. It's very simple. They just put a little, they just check. There's big vein, there's carotid arteries here, very important. These are the ones that could give you strokes if you don't check them.
Crazy.
And they're the
I need
ones
to go get mine checked too.
And they check that. And the only reason
Is
I know
it
about
painful?
No, it's just
Okay.
a scan. It's just a scan. It's not painful at
sweet.
all.
So they don't go in there.
No. Oh,
It's not,
maybe that's
like,
the miscommunication.
intrusive.
No, it's not intrusive. They just put a little scanner on you,
Oh.
and that's it. You just lay down. You lay down. You don't even stand up. They'll
Neat.
lay you down and do it.
Super
Yes.
awesome.
There you go.
Okay. We are thrilled to introduce you to today's guest, Gabrielle Claiborne. Gabrielle has been an out and active trans woman since 2019. And prior to her transition, she owned and operated successful businesses in the construction industry, overseeing multi-million-dollar projects nationwide. Now, today, she is a highly respected trans business owner who was honored by the Atlanta Business Chronicle with their 2019 Outstanding Voice for Diversity and Inclusion Award. In 2015, Gabrielle was recognized as Atlanta's best trans activist. And in 2018, she received Emory University's Alum of the Year Pride Award and was chosen by the Georgia Division of the U.S. Small Business Administration as their LGBT Small Business Champion of the Year.
She currently serves as co-chair of the Trans Affairs Committee on the City of Atlanta's LGBTQ Mayoral Advisory Board. Along with being a successful entrepreneur, Gabrielle is a TEDx and keynote speaker, a dynamic trainer, and the author of Embrace Your Truth, A Journey of Authenticity. My goodness. I mean, please help us welcome Gabrielle Claiborne to the Friendzy.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here.
I'm so excited to have her here. You know, Gabrielle and I serve on Atlanta Mayor Keisha Lance Bottom's LGBTQ Advisory Board. Did I get all the letters in that we
Yes,
use?
you did. LGBT, right?
Exactly. And so we, know each other through that and have known each other or of each other for long before that. So I will say that it's a pleasure to have you on because hopefully everybody else will understand how, even though I've been an advocate and somebody who's been in the community for a long time, you have served for me kind of like an example of leadership and mentorship. So from a distance, it's a pleasure to be able to talk to you here.
Thank you, Melissa. And back at you. I think we all inspire each other to show up, to our fullest capacity. So thank you for showing up the way you do.
Oh, thank you. All right.
So, Gabrielle, for our audience who hasn't ever met you before, can you give us a little bit of your background and your story that led you to where you are today?
Sure. How long do we have?
All day. We got all day. I'm so excited.
Well, thank you. So I'll first give you a few intersections of how I show up. Okay. I am a parent. I'm actually a grandparent as of last year.
Oh, congratulations.
Thank you. I don't want to see anybody doing math in your head. I'm also an author, a TEDx speaker, a entrepreneur. I was raised in a very conservative faith tradition. I'm a fourth generation Pentecostal preacher's kid.
Wow.
So growing up in that conservative faith environment invited me to consider something that had been going on in the background of my life for much of my life, for almost 4 decades of my life. And so, I knew something at a very young age that there was something different about me, right? But I didn't have the language, nor did I have the understanding of, what gender diversity meant to an individual from a personal lived perspective. And so I moved through life. I moved through our culture the way culture expected a white cisgender male to move through this culture. I married a beautiful woman, had 3 amazing kids. I had a very successful vocational career in the construction industry for 30 plus years, was a member and was very involved in a prestigious church here in the Atlanta area. So if you looked at my life on the outside, you would say this person has life by the tail. But in reality, I was living a life of turmoil because of this internal gender dilemma, which I still had no words to describe to anyone. But throughout the course of my life, there were a number of invitations that were inviting me and encouraging me to get honest with that aspect of my identity. And it wasn't until I had an experience, a life-changing experience at the age of 49, where I met myself for the very first time. I found an individual here in the Atlanta area that actually made a living dressing biological males as women. And so I made an appointment with her. And on the day of the appointment, she worked her magic. And after 3 hours of, doing the makeup and the hair and the accessories and the clothes and the heels and the breast forms and all the things that created that feminine silhouette on me, I saw myself in the mirror for the first time. And it was then I knew that's me.
Mm.
And so that set me on the course of finding, my authenticity, stepping more into my authenticity. And that turned every aspect of my life upside down. My relationship with my family, my now ex-wife, my parents, my friends in the workplace, and even in my spiritual community. So needless to say, I was starting my life over at 50, lost everything, and had to rebrand and rebuild from ground up. But I can tell you that over the last 11 years, as I've traveled that journey, I have stepped more into this space of authenticity and what that looks like for me, understanding that authenticity is not a destination. Authenticity is a journey. And the more that I continue to show up authentically and embracing my truth, more and more doors open up for me, more and more doors of opportunity open up for me. And, and that led me to co-founding and operating our transgender inclusion and training consulting firm, Transformation Journeys Worldwide. And so now I'm showing up in Fortune 100, 500 companies, spiritual communities, mental and medical health providers, municipalities, educational institutions, and educating them on how to interact respectfully with transgender, nonconforming, and non-binary individuals. And just last year, I published my Memoir meets self-help book, Embrace Your Truth, A Journey of Authenticity.
I am so excited that we have you on today because, again, the Friendzy is for women over 40 and their journeys, and that includes trans women. And so I'm so glad that this may be an opportunity for so many people who don't understand what being trans means and the fact that it didn't start for you at 49 and 50, that this has been something that has been inside of you this whole time. Last night, I was binging Undone. It's a Netflix documentary series that revolves around sports. So,
Yeah,
so one is about Caitlyn Jenner. I don't know if you've seen this, and I think for a lot of people, Caitlyn Jenner is like their first introduction
right.
to transgender. Now, I may not agree with Caitlyn on a lot of political stuff, but it was a fantastic documentary because she said the same thing you said, and it was really based on what she calls her persona of Bruce, that won the gold medal in the decathlon in the 1976 Montreal Olympics. For those who may not remember, Bruce Jenner's the reason Wheaties is who they are, because he was the first guy to be on the box, and he was like the best athlete in the world. And to hear her perspective of talking and walking through all that, the training, everything, and saying it, and she said that she did the documentary because she wanted to give respect to Bruce, because she's like, without Bruce, I wouldn't have been able to get to Caitlyn. But she talked about how sports was her escape, because she didn't want to have to deal with those, what she considered demons at the time, inside of her when it came to this gender identity issue. So maybe talk a little bit again, just to follow up with this has been something that's inside of you from a young age. It's not just some kind of choice you make all of a sudden.
Yeah, absolutely. In our training, we talk and we share with our audiences that our identity is not a choice. This is not a preference that we elect to, pursue at some point in our life. What this is, it is an identity. And so the only choice that I get to make, the only choice that any of us get to make, is to embrace who we were created to be. And I'll be totally transparent. I feel like I was created to be the individual that I am today. It just took me so long to come to terms with all the things that I had to come to terms with in order to show up authentically. And I love that you bring this concept of paying homage or honoring who we have always been, Melissa, because, for many trans individuals, a lot of times when we do finally make the decision to embrace our truth as transgender people, a lot of times we want to run from our past. We want to run away from that as if it were not life meaning or life giving to us. And so while that misaligned season in our life may not be life giving, it was life inviting to us to consider, what are the next steps in our journey of authenticity. And so consequently, I look back over my life, and those things, what I now recognize as invitations that I once perceived as disappointments or failures, I now see them as invitations to get honest with who I've been all along, right? So helping reframe those disappointments and failures as invitation has allowed me to move through my past iteration with grace and ease, seeing that as a way to get me to where I got to. So I appreciate you bringing that up. And the one thing I talk about in my TED Talk, when it comes to taking those courageous steps, and oh, by the way, we all have to take those courageous steps of authenticity, regardless if you're trans or cisgender or however you identify. We all have to take those courageous steps toward in the direction of our authenticity. And we don't necessarily need to know what our exact destination looks like in order to take those courageous steps. I think oftentimes as individuals, we get stuck in a place that we don't have a plan in front of us. And really the plan is to listen to the voice of our heart and take those courageous steps, because with each step we take, with each authentic step we take, we get a little stronger. We get a little more courageous. We get less stuck. We get more authentic, and every step unfolds that next step.
Oh my goodness. I want to hear a little bit more about when you were a young person, because I think for people who maybe have, gone along with the gender they were born with, can't quite understand that. What does that feel like? So that's my question for you. What did it feel like when you were a child?
It felt like I was misaligned. It felt like that there was something just a little off with me, right? I remember as a young kid when I had working parents, and when both of my parents were out of the house, and my sister and I would come home from school, oftentimes we had a babysitter come over and stay with us. And a lot of times those babysitters were female individuals. And with every babysitter that came over and stayed and watched us, I would be drawn to, don't fall off your chair. I'd be drawn to her breasts. Why didn't I have breasts like my babysitter? It's not like I was necessarily attracted to them in an intimate way. It was just like I wanted to have breasts, and so having those feelings of being misaligned. Why did I not? Why was I not able to do the things that I saw my kids, my girls, and my wife do? Go get their nails done. Have a spa day. Even go to bridal showers. Why couldn't I do that? Because those were things that I really longed to experience. And it wasn't until I got honest with myself that I actually started feeling that alignment. For so many years, because of that misalignment, I had to deal, and because of the environment that I grew up in, I had to deal with a lot of guilt and shame. And it wasn't until years later that I became a fan of Brene Brown, where she talks about the difference between guilt and shame. To understand how to navigate through all those different dynamics in my own life. And so, as I've taken these courageous steps of correcting that misalignment, if you will, I feel like I show up more authentically in the world today. And, this is not just something that I had to go through, Jen and Melissa. This is something that my whole family had to go through. Because when I came out to them, it was like every aspect of who they knew me to be was up in the air, and it was like off the table. It's like I remember, my kids approaching me when I came out to them. When I finally got courageous enough to come out to them, they were saying, "We don't even feel like we know you anymore. Who are you? Are you still our parent? How do we celebrate Father's Day? These are some of the conversations. I mean, do I invite you to my wedding?" This is the conversation that my oldest daughter and I had a few years ago. So everything about the form of our relationship changed. And as a result of that, thankfully to them, they are leaning into, kind of what does this look like moving forward for all of us, and having those courageous and oftentimes very difficult conversations of how we move forward with this. So those are just some of the things that happened throughout the course of my transition.
I'm glad you brought up about the family, having to deal with this too, because this is something, like you said, there's not a lot of resources there. It's getting better. Like, you are a resource. This conversation's a
Right.
resource, maybe the first resource for a lot of people. But going back to, quickly, that Caitlyn Jenner documentary on Netflix, again, called Undone. Her son is interviewed. The Kardashians don't do an interview, but her son does with during his Bruce's first marriage.
Right.
And he talked about when because Caitlyn wanted to begin the transition
Right.
after the Olympics, and then decided not to. And that's when Bruce married Chris, and they, had, and he was part of the Kardashian family. But
Right.
between Bruce's two marriages, the transition. And so he talked to his first wife and his son about the transition. And so the son said, he was in elementary school at the time, and it's something I would have never thought about. And he said that he was scared, and because he thought that that meant that his dad was going to disappear, and
Right.
this new person was going to be somebody completely different that he would not have a relationship with. So as a little child, he thought that meant you're leaving me. And so in my mind, I thought, again, Pete, if you don't understand what's going on, that this is the same person, the problem is you're trying to get the person to be their authentic self,
Right.
and they're not disappearing. They're actually going to be better than, because they're going to be happier.
Yeah.
Anyway, it's just when you talk about that, it's like the bravery you have to go through, not only for yourself, but for these relationships
Right.
is so admirable.
Well, thank you. I'll share a really brief story with you. A few years ago, I moved out of home in 2010 and began my transition. And a few years ago, my ex-wife called me and she said, "I need to let you know something that happened the other day." And I said, "Okay." And she said, "I was walking upstairs and I looked down the hall when I got to the top of the stairs and I looked in our son's room, and our son was in his room on his bed doing something underneath the bed." And she walked in his room and said, "So and so, what are you doing?" And he said, and he kind of felt like he got caught. He said, "Nothing. I'm not doing anything." She said, "Really? What are you doing?" And she persisted, and he finally relented and reached under the bed and he pulled out photos of me pre-transition. And he said, "I'm just wanting to not forget what it used to look like." And these are some of the realities that family members go through as they're going through their own grieving process around an individual who is transitioning in the family, whether it's a child, whether it's a sibling, whether it's a parent, right? And I'll never forget the first time that my youngest daughter met me back in 2000, I think it was 2012, 2013. We actually went out for dinner. And through the course of the evening, she looked at me and she said, "I just have to tell you, I have never seen you happier and
Hmm.
more at peace than I have right now." And when I heard her say that, it just struck a chord in me because I realized at that moment that I can only be the best parent that I can be when I'm being honest with myself and with honest with them. And right. So, but being honest with myself and being honest with them was a difficult journey for us to travel. But hopefully, through my courageous steps that I've taken, that I'm inspiration to my kids and those who know me, who knew me pre-transition, and having navigated all the things that we've navigated, that they understand that authenticity is the only option of how you
Hmm.
live your life.
Right.
I oftentimes encourage folks to shift the perspective of authenticity and look at, okay, what if you live your life inauthentic? What does that mean for you? And what I've learned is that every inauthentic step we take, we get further and further away from our capacity as human beings. It's like getting into debt. You can get into debt real quick, but getting out of debt takes you years. And so for every inauthentic step we take, we get more in debt, and we risk damaging relationships that people thought were built on a certain context, only to find out that there was something going on in the background that they weren't being honest about.
Hmm.
But those inauthentic steps are because you're living under this culture of pressure to choose your gender before you're even born. What are your thoughts on that? Like, how can we as a greater society start to embrace more difference and celebrate more difference? Melissa and I have talked about that on the Friendzy podcast before. Let's not pretend we're all the same. Let's celebrate how different we all are. And when it comes to this space of gender, I mean, when I was pregnant, it was the first thing people asked me, "What are you having? Is it a boy or a
Exactly.
girl?"
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
So what are some of your ideas around how do we change the conversation just in our society
Yes.
in general?
I agree, and I just when my son was born and he was a baby and he was bald and no, you couldn't tell, he was just a squishy little thing, and I
No,
had
none of
family
them
mem
you can
and
tell.
I had a family member who said, "Oh, he's all boy," and I'm like, what are you talking about? Yeah. So anyway, I
Yeah.
second what she's asking. Yes.
Well, here's the question. I appreciate that you both have brought that question up, because there is a cultural assumption that many people assume, and that is an assumption that is revealed in that one question. Are you having a boy or a girl? Because think about it. They're asking that question based on a sonogram, which is looking for a particular piece of anatomy or lack
You
of.
can say penis. You can say
Yeah,
penis.
right.
Yes.
So it's like, okay, we're defining gender based on biological sex. And so, what is now emerging over the last 10 to 20 years as medical and mental health care providers are working with transgender, nonconforming, and non binary individuals is there is something even more compelling than our anatomy that determines our gender. And that is our gender identity. And gender identity is defined by that which we know, all of us today, whether we're trans, cis, non-binary, however we identify, who we know ourselves to be on the inside, whether it's male, female, a combination of both, or maybe neither. And one of the most helpful graphics that we use in our Trans 101 cultural competency training that we share with our clients is a diagram of the genderbread person. And if you're not familiar with the genderbread person, I encourage you to Google it, because what the genderbread person diagram shows us is it shows the expansiveness of gender, how we're showing up as humanity. And it shows 4 aspects of gender. Gender identity is an aspect, gender expression, how we express our gender on the outside with hairstyles, the clothes we wear, the accessories, vocal inflection and mannerisms, our biological sex. While sex is determined between the legs, gender is determined between the ears. And then finally, sexual orientation. So these are 4 aspects of gender that we all have as human beings. And these aspects of gender exist on continuums. So they're not just black or white. So what makes each of us unique as human beings is where any one of us falls on each of those 4 very different and distinct continuums. So this diagram helps us understand that gender is a whole lot more complex than perhaps many of us were raised to believe. And this is why many trans individuals don't come out until later in life, although most of us have known that there was something different about us at a very young age.
Well, yes, I think that if you are non-trans straight, then you
That would be
have
cisgender,
okay,
straight.
cisgender straight,
Right.
and I'm even learning. So cisgender,
I was going to say, can we do a vocabulary lesson? I'm
Yes,
not
go ahead.
kidding.
Absolutely.
Because I think that in your world of this teaching that you do with transformation journeys, all these words are very commonplace. But I think for the average person, we're afraid to ask, what does that mean? So can you go through all of them for us? I would love this. And Melissa, we need to create an infographic for it,
Absolutely,
right?
yes.
Right.
You're exactly right.
So I appreciate that, because here's the thing, one thing that we've learned, one reality that we've learned in working with our clients is that it's like learning a new language. And
Yes.
until you feel comfortable with the language and understand the terms and definitions, you're not going to feel empowered. You're going to feel like, I'm going to make a mistake.
Yes.
As a result
Right.
of fearing making a mistake, I'm not going to say anything. And that is just as disrespectful as making a mistake. So this is a safe space, right?
Absolutely.
So a couple of definitions. Transgender describes individuals like myself whose gender identities, who I know myself to be on the inside, does not match the sex, the biological sex, that I was assigned at birth. So trans is a Latin prefix for across. So my gender identity is across from the biological sex that I was assigned at birth. Okay?
Mhm.
Cisgender, conversely, describes individuals whose gender identities do match the sex that they were assigned at birth. So if you were assigned female at birth and you identify as a female, you're a cisgender female, right? If you're assigned male at birth and you identify as male, you're a cisgender male. So again, Cis is a Latin prefix for the same side as. So cisgender individuals' gender identities, who they know themselves to be, is on the same side as the gender that they were assigned at birth.
Mm-hmm.
Non-binary describes individuals whose gender identities are neither male nor female, or a combination of both. And there are a number of different non-binary gender identities that individuals can identify as. And so, um, you have individuals that identify as gender fluid, and these are individuals who are comfortable moving back and forth between a male gender expression and a female gender expression at different times, or perhaps a combination of both. That's gender fluid non-binary individuals. Agender individuals are individuals who identify as neither male nor female. So they're genderless, right? So those are just a few non-binary gender identities. Sexual orientation is who we're attracted to romantically, physically, and emotionally. And again, sexual orientation and gender identity, completely different spectrum. So, the sexual orientations are straight, gay, pansexual. This is an individual who is attracted to all genders. Bisexual describes a sexual orientation for individuals who are attracted to two genders. Asexual individuals describes individuals whose sexual orientation, they're not attracted to any gender. So those are just a few terms and definitions, and I would want to make sure that if you want to learn more, I invite you to visit our resources page on our website. It has a lot of good information there, a lot of good videos, a lot of good content that could help position you to be a good advocate for the transgender, nonconforming, and non-binary community.
And again,
Thank you so much.
Absolutely.
That's so helpful. And it's so nice to have you. I mean, I'm sorry to say, but dumb it down, because it really is what we need to have the words and the language to use around it, so that we can be inclusive and respectful and just do the right thing.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Mm-hmm. Well, it goes back to, for those who are cisgender straight, I think that there has not been as much of that self-reflected, face the music by yourself. Mm-hmm. You're worried that your family is going to reject you. You're worried society is going to reject you. You're worried religion is going to reject you. And that's not an insult, but I do think that for those who are confused, why do we have to have all this? Why are there so many letters in that, LGBT plus? Because a lot of times we use LGBTQ plus because there's so many things to add. Is because it goes back to exactly what Gabrielle was talking about, is authenticity, right? Is to live, and whatever it takes to help you identify with somebody else and not feel alone, I'm all for it. So now let's reverse the roles from adults to children. So Jenn and I have 3 young children between the two of us. I made it sound like we're a couple. So
we're soul sisters, but not married.
There you
That's
go.
Right. And so, as a parent, as a grandparent who may be listening, how, what is it that we can do to help these children if one of our children is someone who is dealing with gender identity issues? How would we recognize it, and how can we help?
Well, I guess I would start by saying, listen to your child, because your child is going to be, is if they're provided a space to be honest with who they are, who they know themselves to be, the child is not confused about their gender identity. And children are coming out at younger ages. And as long as, there are households, there are families, spaces in the families that provide a space for children to explore their gender, and this doesn't mean that an individual who may have some compulsion to explore their gender, that they may not be trans. They just need to explore it, just to understand what it looks like for them. But just to allow a space for them to explore this allows them to own it, and to own whatever works for them, right? And also know that you're not alone. I think a lot of times we hear parents share this sense of being overwhelmed, and I don't even know where to turn. I don't know anything about this. Know that you're not alone. There are resources available. PFLAG, Trevor Project. These are a lot of organizations that you can plug into to find other parents who are navigating these journeys that perhaps may be similar to yours.
A quick follow-up. So yeah, PFLAG, I cry every time at Pride when they pass by, because again, this is the
Absolutely.
family members of people, who are in these categories. And they're the families that a lot of people wish they had, because so many people get rejected by their own families. And so, um, something you mentioned, like, I also caution from a lesbian standpoint that when people talk about, oh, do you got a boyfriend at school? Do you got a girlfriend at school? Like, the
Right,
fact that you don't have inclusive language when you talk to these children is
right,
bothersome to me, because you don't understand what you're doing to a child who may be gay.
right.
So is there any kind of language that we can also include, Gabrielle, to make sure that if our child ends up being trans and we are not recognizing it, how can we be inclusive in our conversation with our children?
Use their pronouns. Use their correct pronouns. Use the name that they want to use to for you to use to call them. When people are misgendered or mispronounced, it's like a death by 1,000 paper cuts. All right.
Mm.
It just it's a microaggression after microaggression after microaggression. And after time, this this drives the child to look for support outside of the home. And this is the last thing that I trust that caring parents really want, is for their child to look for support outside of their own home. So understand that, use their pronouns. And if your child is non-binary, don't push back on using they, them, and theirs. It is going to be uncomfortable using something other than
Mhm.
he or she for your child. But if your non binary child wants you to use they, them, and theirs, then you get used to it. And, you can practice using they, them, and theirs. Understand that there's going to be mistakes made. I mean, I often akin using pronouns to, for 20 years you had the trash can underneath your sink, and one day you decided to move it to the pantry. When you After doing that, when you had to throw something away, where are you going to go? You're going to go to the sink until you finally reprogram
Right.
the trash cans in the pantry, right? It's no different in using new pronouns for your child. But once you use those new pronouns, I have heard story after story after story of a young trans individual sharing the impact of when their parent used their correct name and their pronouns for them.
Oh, that's incredible. What about in organizations? Because that's some of the work you do too, teaching businesses, companies, groups how to learn about being inclusive.
Yeah. Well, in the work that we do, we've recognized that there are two tracks to this work. One track is personal cultural competency, and another track is organizational cultural competency. And both of those competencies have to be in place for an employer to set themselves up as that elusive employer of choice for the LGBTQ community, right? So we're very mindful about meeting our clients where they are, because our clients are at different places on this journey of creating that inclusive culture. Um, but, you know, in addition to creating that personal cultural competency for all of the employees within an organization needs to be mindful of, the business case reasons and the best practices that organizations are actually leaning into to to create that inclusive culture. Policies around dress codes. Are your dress codes inclusive for not only binary trans individuals, though that is trans individuals like myself who transition from male to female and female to male, but are your dress codes inclusive for non-binary individuals who may identify as some combination of both, of male or female, right? Do you have inclusive facilities in your workplace? Do you have policies around how these facilities are being used by everyone in your workplace? Are your talent acquisition protocols and practices set up to meet gender diverse individuals where they are? If you're at a job fair, an LGBTQ job fair, and you have a job applicant who is gender diverse, who perhaps may not have fully aligned legal documents. In other words, they may be presenting female with their gender expression, but may have misaligned legal documents with an M on their driver's license. How do you navigate that conversation in a respectful way, right?
Mm-hmm.
These are just some of the best practices that we talk about, but it's not just how you show up in the organization that's important. It's also how you show up outside the four walls of your organization that really sends a message to the community that you are perhaps an employer of choice for them. So are you showing up at your local pride celebrations? Are you a member of your local LGBTQ Chamber of Commerce? Are you showing up in the spaces that we live, right? So if I see an organization showing up in those spaces, then I'm going to stand up and take notice and say, okay, perhaps this is an organization for me to pursue.
I'm sometimes disturbed by, and we live in, Metro Atlanta. We have some prestigious private schools in the community, but I always cringe when I see pictures of the uniforms at these schools, because I wonder, for those kids who don't want to wear the gender specified uniform for them, so do you have a resource? Because I've been wanting to write letters. So do you have a resource or suggestions, or, how does someone like me, who's an activist at heart, want to reach out to these schools and say, have you ever thought about the fact that some of the girls may want to wear the ties and some of the boys may want to wear the dresses? And
Yeah.
how do you make that okay?
Yeah, absolutely. This is the recommendation we share with our audience, our clients. If you want to make your your dress codes more inclusive for everyone, you make them less gender specific and more attire specific. So rather than saying when men wear ties, you say when ties are worn. That way, an individual who may identify as androgynous, who has more of who may have a combination of male and female or masculine and feminine gender expression, they could wear a tie and perhaps wear some lipstick, right? But that way, that individual feels like they see themselves in your dress code. So make it less gender specific and more attire specific.
Because Jen, the activist in me, I'm always a walk the walk. Everybody can talk a good game about how,
Right.
it's 2021 and we're going to be inclusive and we love our gay and lesbian and trans brothers and sisters and pansexual and bisexual, and and we love everybody. Do you? Then walk the walk. And so
Absolutely.
every time I see that stuff, I'm like, this is old fashioned. Why are you still doing this?
Right. And I think that bringing it up is important, because I'm guessing, Melissa, whoever's receiving that letter has not even considered it
Correct.
as offensive, has not even thought about what impact it could make. And bringing it to their attention is the only way they'll know to change.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I will tell you that making an individual use a gender designated uniform is like making them use the wrong restroom. There is no difference in that. Okay, so let's put this on the level playing field that it should be on. Right, that is a microaggression. Making them use a restroom that it doesn't align with their gender identity and gender expression, that is a microaggression.
And the thing is too, and also for people who will, and Jen and I've talked about this before, people who knee-jerk reaction, who criticize the need to do something different, that's what frustrates me, is because, change is a part of life. And some of the things we're doing don't apply anymore. And and it's not being a weak culture to, or overly sensitive culture, to make sure that our individuals in our society are thriving. As in, I don't understand why people, there are those who I'm sure you have faced and I have faced, who don't understand why we have to do anything different than what's been done, because it's benefited them. And I don't know why they feel like this won't benefit them as well.
Well, in my opinion, this is why. It's because their lived experience is different from mine. And they look at their lived experience, that heteronormative lived experience that you were mentioning earlier, Melissa. They look at that as the normal lived experience. But what they're missing is that, I mean, think about it. People pay money to go to the Georgia Aquarium. People pay money to go to the Atlanta Botanical Gardens. Why? To look at the diversity in our world, to look at the diversity in our universe. Why can we not see humanity in the same way?
That's a great point.
You know what I'm saying? It's like
true.
when you get courageous enough to sit down across the table from a gender diverse individual, you are going to realize that, oh my God, we have more in common than not.
Absolutely.
And even though my lived experience may be different from yours, it doesn't make me any less human than you, right? We are just another expression of the beautiful facet of the human experience.
So beautiful. I have learned so much from you, Gabrielle. Thank you so much. I want everybody to follow your journey, read your book, and learn about what you're doing in the community. Transformational Journeys, www.com. And of course, we're going to link to all of this in the show notes. You can follow Gabrielle.Claiborne on Instagram as well, and find her on Facebook. Where else? We're talking everywhere, Twitter. So you can learn and follow more about her story. And I encourage you to go and read her book as well. It's called Embrace Your Truth, A Journey of Authenticity.
You're not gone yet, though, Gabrielle.
So excited.
Yes,
this has been transformational information. I love it.
You're still in the hot seat, though. Okay.
Okay. Yes, you are.
Because with every interview, we do what's called the Friendzy 5. And so it's just 5 questions. First thing that comes to mind. Are you ready?
I am
ready. Okay, here we go, love. All right. Where is your cozy, happy place?
Beach.
What's your favorite framed thing in your home?
Framed thing in my home. A picture of me and my daughter.
Oh. What is your most memorable birthday?
60 last year.
And any specifics? Was it a surprise? Was it? I know I'm not supposed to do follow-up questions.
No, I appreciate you defaulting. It was probably that I don't know. There was just this apprehension of 60, right?
Yeah.
And just knowing that I navigated 60 and I'm still here, and I'm actually I'm with every day that I'm showing up in this world, I'm actually stepping more into my legacy, and just understanding that impact of legacy just kind of gave me a whole new perspective on life.
Same. I'm glad I asked a follow-up question.
Cool. I know. Good follow-up.
All right. What is a daily routine or ritual that you stick to?
Oh, wow. I've got so many. But the most meaningful one is looking at myself in the mirror when I wake up and saying, I love you, Gabrielle.
Oh, a lot of cis women could learn from that. All right. And what fashion trend did you jump on? It could be any era, anytime.
Let's see. Fashion trend. Lord. I'm just trying to think about that one a minute. Fashion trend that I jumped on. I haven't had but 10 years to live authentically. Authentic. So I'm trying to remember fashion trend.
All right. Well, you know what? Let me adjust the question for you, since you have a unique experience from our other guest. What is the first fashion trend that you were excited to jump on when you were your authentic self? What's the first piece of clothing you bought?
No, authentic trend was going blonde, girl.
Going blonde, all right.
Yes, going blonde. I love it. See, that's it.
No, that was a destination for me.
That's it. What a girl. We got 3 blondes here. I'm with you.
I love it. I know. I think I'm going to stay blonde forever. I feel like.
Yeah.
I love it. Yeah,
there's a little bit of power in being a blonde. I'm not gonna lie.
See, you all are inspiring me. You should know it.
That's right. That's right.
Oh my gosh, this has been such a wonderful conversation. Thank you so much for joining the Friendzy, for offering us your friendship. We're just so appreciative.
Thank you for allowing me to be a part of today's conversation.
So, Melissa Carter, I can't even count the ways that I have learned new things from Gabrielle. Oh my gosh, what an eye-opening conversation.
Well, and I appreciate her strength to be able to be a spokesperson for the trans community. And like I said, just because LGBTQ has the L, which represents me as a lesbian, and the T that represents her as transgender, there's so many different. We don't have the same issues in our lives, right? And so what I
Totally
love,
different.
yeah, and what I love about our community is the fact that we embrace each other of differences. I mean, the LGBTQ community to me is like a mentor organization for everybody because we brought people from different backgrounds, different races, different issues, and we're politically active together as one unit. It still doesn't mean I understand. And so, I mean, even today, having been exposed to the trans community for a long time, Gabrielle still educated me today because we all are coachable into new things, into new people. So I appreciate her even more than I did before.
Yes, and I was trying to think about it. I don't know that I've ever had that intimate of a conversation with a trans person before that interview. So I'm just so grateful to have that one-on-one experience. I think, like she said, we understand one another better as humans when we just open up these conversations. And I appreciated her letting me be kind of dumb about some of the terms and saying, maybe I'm not as up to speed as I want to be or need to be. And I just appreciate that level of understanding because, Melissa, here's the difference. I can understand what being attracted to another person feels like, right? So I can have that same understanding for you being attracted to a woman as I am being attracted to a man because I have those feelings of attraction, those
Right.
feelings of desire, right? I
Right.
understand what that looks like. And I can see, oh, it's different for her. She's attracted to women. Easy for me to understand. Now, I have not had the same experience as Gabrielle of feeling like I was not born in the right body for
Yeah.
the gender identity that I feel is most me. I've never had that experience. So I really appreciated her explaining how she felt as a child. That changed me forever.
Well, and I also think too, as a lesbian, when people have criticized the gay community for, like we chose this life, again, that idea of choice, which, everybody has choice, but there's certain things that you are born with and born as, and you have to use the tools you're given and you have choices within that. And so, for me, it's like, well, why would in the world would anybody choose to face a life of rejection? Because again, as we talked in our interview with
True.
Gabrielle, it's about family rejection, the worst. There's a charity that I worked with in the past who had a relationship with the Atlanta Police Department, knowing that if the Atlanta Police Department came upon these children on the street who had been kicked out of their house for being gay, they knew where to take them to this charity because they had housing for them. So to have housing consistent enough so that the Atlanta
Yeah.
Police Department knew, okay, well, if I pick up a gay kid, I know where to take them because these kids are having to live on the streets because their parents are so disgusted by them. So the same with the transgender community. They go through a lot more expense, a lot more physical, endurement and pain and transition. Plus, on top of that, the rejection of society and their family. Like, why would you choose that? So to me, like, even when I've
Mhm.
heard of people being critical of transgender in the past, it's been, but why would they go to that much effort if this wasn't real? If this wasn't a
Mhm.
real need in order to be authentic? And so, I mean, again, I think people just need to understand, like we preach here on the Friendzy, difference is good.
Yeah. It's
Difference
great.
is good,
The
and we have,
best.
and even regardless of where you come from and how you've been raised, to be part of the frenzy means, okay, you know what? As women, whether it's cis women or trans women, we're all women and we all have these same issues. And even we may have different issues because, like I said with Gabrielle, like I want to go deeper into the conversation about what's like to be a businessman as opposed to a businesswoman from a cultural standpoint,
Oh
right?
my gosh.
Where
So much interesting
Yes,
conversation
where
there.
Gabrielle could be like, "Okay, tell me what it was like to go through puberty as a cis girl," like there's so that we have differences, but it's okay. We're still women. And so
Right.
that's what we're about. Is just we
And I think
want to
it's like
share that.
if we can tap into the feeling right? So when she was explaining that feeling of being a child and feeling like she was in the wrong place or in the wrong body, you can apply that to your own life, the connection to a feeling where you knew you didn't belong, you knew something wasn't right, you had an intuition that just felt off about something. You and so you know, connect that same feeling to someone else to lead you to acceptance and understanding.
Love that. You're exactly right, because we've all had that feeling before.
Right.
And to me, sometimes maybe that's what life's about, is life purposely puts us in situations where we don't feel like we belong. And the purpose of life is to clamor and learn and grow wise to how we can actually be a part of a collective and be part of, just this joint effort. I don't know. The older I get, the more that's what I think. I think like
Mhm.
at the end of the day, nobody wants to be lonely. That's it. That's a basic human simple thing is we're not meant to be alone. And when you're alone, it's the worst feeling in the world. And so whatever that looks like for you, I think you're brilliant in that, Jen, is the fact, yes, tap into the understanding is nobody deserves to be alone, regardless of who they are and what their
Regardless.
background is.
Yeah. And that's why we always encourage everybody to share their own story, because can you
Mhm.
imagine how brave Gabrielle had to be to share her truth?
Absolutely. And
Can you
continues to do so.
imagine the courage that took?
Yeah.
I I'm not nearly as courageous as her. God
Yeah.
knew that, right? And
Well,
I
first of
just
all,
am
it's
in
not a
awe.
I take that I don't agree with that. I believe that everybody has the courage to do it. Everybody has the courage to do that, but I think that she is so excited to be her authentic self,
Mhm.
and I think that's the difference.
It's infectious, isn't it?
I think that if
Yeah.
you are living the life you need to be living, regardless of who you are, then you're more apt to share it and tell it, and that's also, I think, the difference too is, um, for people like Gabrielle, for people like me, anybody that's had to live an extended period of time in hiding, there is such a relief to come out that you don't care what people say. I didn't care what people said when I came out. I didn't care about the criticism because I knew better and I knew the difference of feeling like I had to pretend to be straight and that I was authentically myself.
Mhm.
And it's just the same with her is the same what my family said. My mother saw how happy I was, and her family saw how happy, and that's all you want for people. So again, yes, Jen, you have the ability to do it because you're brave in so many different ways, and you're brave on behalf of your daughter, and you're brave in speaking out things in your life. And I just think if everybody just understood it's like you said, your story matters. Your story, we're not just saying that to say it's not just a line we came up with to say, hey, this is a good branding line. We mean it.
Right.
Your story matters, and if
Matters.
it's authentic, then tell it. And if there is a friend of yours who would enjoy this episode of the Friends, that we ask you to share this important conversation. So, an Apple Podcast, that's where most of you listen to the show. And so, if you are new to the show, on Apple Podcasts, you go in there and then you look for three dots at the top right corner of our podcast. So when you're listening, you see those three dots, you click on them, you drop down menu comes up, and you select share episode. Then select the green messages option and you can text it to a friend. Okay. It sounds simpler than it is me explaining it. And you can always contact Jen and I, Melissa at thefrenzy.com, Jen at thefrenzy.com, if you have any confusion on how to get access to us, because we want you to listen.
Okay, let's grab a question out of the You Don't Know My Life box. And feel free to steal these questions, use them on
Yeah.
Facebook, take them to dinner with your friends.
Yes, yes, yes. All right. So it made me think of Gabrielle talking about how when she saw herself in the mirror and introduced, and that the fact that she just loves how she looks and feels now. So what was your most glamorous night? Because that's how I feel like she may have thought, like, I am finally who I am. So when you're glamorous, you feel like, I'm it. I'm here. I have arrived and I look good. So what's your most glamorous night, Jen Hobby?
It was attending the Grammy Awards, and I got to attend with my husband, Grant, and we got super dressed up, and it was a magical night. I just remember, feeling like my makeup looked just right, and my dress and my heels looked just right, and we had a great time. I think I was pregnant at the time, actually. And I was one of those strange women who loved being pregnant. I
Oh,
didn't
that's
I did
great.
not love the recovery from C-sections. That's where I was miserable, but I loved being pregnant. I don't know, there was something about it just like made me feel so good, and I felt like my skin looked good and my hair looked good and everything just like felt voluptuous, you know?
Uh-huh.
So yes, I would say the night that we got to attend the Grammy Awards in Los Angeles, and I think just being in Los Angeles makes you feel fancy anyway.
That's true, and I
How
think
about
that
you?
well, I was gonna say that was it Lauren or Reese that you were pregnant with because she gets to say that she got to go to the Grammys, I think.
I know. It has to be. This is how bad my memory is now after 2 kids and lots of lack of sleep. I think it was with Lauren because it would have
No,
been
here's the
harder to
thing.
travel out there
No,
with a
just
baby already at home. So I'm pretty
stop
sure
that,
it was
stop
pregnant with
that.
Lauren.
No, you know what? Just say you don't remember, so when they ask you and that way they both can say they went to the Grammys. That's a good thing sometimes. When
Okay.
you can't remember
Yeah.
which child it was, we'll just include both.
Okay. We'll go
For
with both.
me I, had the honor of receiving a GLAAD award, and so it was a very glamorous night. So I had the power red strapless
Yes, girl.
dress. I had the hair up, very fancy. Had the bling jewelry on. And so yeah, that was a great, meaningful night because it was I've had the pleasure of winning awards, several awards. That to me, for some reason, had a lot of I don't know depth to it because it was a big award, and so it was again celebrating me telling my story basically,
Yeah.
and so it was a
So
good night.
what does the GLAAD Awards do?
Um, uh, the GLAAD Awards is basically for gay and lesbian, for LGBT community. It's a very active political organization. GLAAD Awards usually attract big celebrities. And so this was an event that happened in Atlanta. They have them in every city. Atlanta, where we live, is one of the largest, LGBTQ communities in the nation. And so they just help not only they not only help gays and lesbians to be able to see themselves on television and in movies, and they help representation, but they also kind of are a watchdog to make sure that representation is not a farce, that gays and lesbians are represented well. So they usually come out with a report every year of how many gays and lesbians and transgenders are represented in media. And you'd be surprised at how few those numbers are. And so anyway, they do a great job in helping empower the gay community, but also educate the straight community.
Awesome. Love it.
All right, Jenn Hobby has this week's mirror mantra.
Okay. After our conversation with Gabrielle, I have been thinking about acceptance comes before understanding. Okay. So you can accept and love everyone before you can understand them. It can be you don't have to understand someone to accept them. Does that make sense? So here's your
Yes.
mirror mantra. I want you to look in the mirror at some point this week and say, I will not be quick to judge. I will be quick to accept, then try to understand.
I love that.
We are all humans. So it's, I will not be quick to judge. I will be quick to accept and then try to understand.
I love that. Nice job, Jenn Hobby. All right, listen, I want you to check out the Friendzy's YouTube channel. We tape, we videotape, I should say, all of our podcasts. And so you get to see us and all of our expressions and all of our goofs sometimes. Sometimes the bloopers make it into the YouTube channel. We have videos, extended interviews, sometimes with guests. And so you get extra content on YouTube. And we ask you also to subscribe to the YouTube channel as well, because we don't have a vanity address yet. So you have to go to YouTube and search for the Friendzy. And if enough of you subscribe, then we get to have our own little vanity website, which would be like, YouTube/the Friendzy. That's our goal.
So
there.
cool. That's our goal. Yes. And follow the Friendzy on Instagram. If you want to share about a show that really, meant a lot to you, you can screen grab the podcast and then tag us so we can repost it to thank you.
The Friendzy is hosted and produced by Melissa Carter. I heard she's pretty awesome. And Jenn Hobby.
Sound editing by Bo Johnson.
Jenn Hobby's awesome too. Original soundtrack produced by Tammy Hurt for Placement Music, written and recorded by Mark Daniels.
The Friendzy celebrates friendships over 40. So thank you so much for spending your time with us. We know it is in short supply, so just know that we appreciate you and we love your friendship.
So until next week, trust your gut
Share your story
and
and
stop lying
lying
about your age.
age.
We'll see you next week.